I don't know what happened to Arkane.
Yeah, it sounds like they went from what was the last game they made? Dishonored 2?
Well, it was Deathloop, which was
Deathloop, right.
interesting, but not my cup of tea. But no, they went from Prey and Dishonored. Alex, I've got a games you didn't think we'd play for you.
All right. What game did you not think you would play? Did I not think you would play, maybe?
Well, I feel like this is a little bit of a cheat, because people might have thought that I was going to play this game just because I really have an affection for Arkane Studios, and I've liked their games in the past, like, Dishonored and Prey. But anyway, the game that we're talking about is very recently released Redfall. And, I had seen the direct that they had done where they showed the footage and everything, and I was like, okay, that's a game about...
Yeah, I saw a little bit when they had the trailer, I think.
I was a little concerned, to be honest with you, because I had just tried Deathloop, which was also Arkane Studios, and I wasn't a big fan of Deathloop. I didn't like the gameplay loop, the idea that you had to assassinate all of these targets without dying, because otherwise you go back to the beginning of the game, and that's the loop of death that you go through and everything. I wasn't a big fan of that.
Yeah, I don't think I played Deathloop.
No, you probably haven't played much from Arkane. Did you play Dishonored?
I played Loop Hero. No, I didn't. I have Dishonored now, but I haven't played it.
And I know that you didn't play Prey.
I have that and also have not played it.
Yeah.
So no, I have not played much from Arkane.
You have not played anything from Arkane. No. Which is too bad, because Dishonored and Prey are excellent games. They're excellent games, and they were really great examples of the immersive sim. So when Redfall came out, they were like, it's an immersive sim, but it's going to be more open world, and it can be a multiplayer game and all of this, and you're going to go and you're going to hunt vampires, and there's a few different character classes that you can play. Terrific. Okay, fine. I guess I'll give it a try. And it launched a few days ago, and so I thought that I would that I would try it. So things don't start well. Let me see if I can explain this. When Arkane does a game, it has a tendency to really start you off feeling, as an immersive sim hopefully does, that you are in that world, where you are literally immersed in the game world right up at the front. You think about Dishonored, and there's that part where you're as Corvo, you're going up to that palace, and you are just absolutely engulfed in the framework of this game, and you're having these conversations with the characters, and they're right in your face and directly interacting with you. Prey, you're in your apartment, you go into the helicopter, look out over that city, and the music starts, and you're right there. In Redfall, they do this, still frame cutscene at the beginning of, key art, and they have a narrator telling you what the story is while those still frames are showing on screen. Not particularly immersive. And then after about 5 minutes of watching that, they have you on a boat. And you're on this boat that has been beached because vampires somehow made the seas, rise up around you. But you didn't actually see that in a cinematic, because there wasn't a cinematic. There was a still frame of key art that showed that to you. And when I started to see that, I was like, now I've seen this style before, but it's usually on top-down or smaller indie games where they don't have fully rendered characters in the game. So it's weird that they chose to do that here, and I could only think that maybe they were doing it because of budgetary reasons. But then, when I get on the boat, it kind of blurs your vision, and as your vision unblurs, there's a vampire feeding in front of you, and the vampires are coming towards you, and then a vampire queen comes through the door and kind of goes, oh, yeah, I was hoping that I'd meet you, and then there's a sunlight thing that happens, and they all go away, and you have to get off of the boat. Now, so I'm getting the impression at that point, oh, there are fully rendered characters in this game. Okay, so that's something. I don't know why we did the keyframe thing to begin with, but okay, we're fine. And then I start moving around the boat. The controller insists on taking me from about 0 to 100 in terms of the speed of my mouse cursor, where like I'll start moving a little bit, and it's doing nothing. And then I move it a little bit more, and my head whips around to the other side of the screen. And then they actually introduce me to combat, and the first thing that you fight...
Is it Vampire Queen?
No, they're just dudes.
Oh, okay.
They're just people, because this town is not just populated with vampires, you see. It's mostly populated with just these human cult members.
And they worship the vampires?
Yeah. These cultists, with my starting pistol, could be taken down in one shot to the head, or pretty much 2 shots to anywhere else on their body. So there's that. It specifically states at the beginning that you can play your way. And I liked that idea because that's what you figure an immersive sim is. I'm going to have different ways to address an issue. You can be stealthy, or you can go straight up to the enemies. But when I started to realize how easy it was to dispatch the enemies, I stopped thinking that stealth was actually a useful thing to do at all, because there didn't seem to be much reason to it.
So it's you can stealth, but honestly, you'd be fine running and gunning?
I found it was usually more effective than anything else. If I did any kind of stealth, it was mostly to try and position myself in a better spot so I could open fire on the enemies they're in. But there is also this other problem, which is that most of the enemies are stupid. And
yeah, I saw something about the AI of the general enemies being rather dumb.
Let me see if I can explain this to you in these terms. So I go into one of these buildings where it's like the vampire lair, right? There's the vampire lairs. And they have me go through this building, and there's this locked door, and it's got this like blue light coming from underneath the door. And I'm like, oh, there's probably something bad in there. But it's a locked door, and you need a specific key. So I go through like to the basement. I get this key, and it's a key to the master bedroom. Okay, so I go back to the key, and I unlock the door, and there, like just suspended in air, is a vampire. But it's not just a vampire; it's a named vampire. It's like Nurse Ada or something. Okay, and I go up to the vampire. It does nothing. It's just hovering in the air. I'm a foot away from it. Pop, pop, dead. 5 seconds. Done and dusted. Literally, dusted.
Usually your named characters take a bit more damage before they die.
Yes. Yes, usually they do.
I've been playing World of Warcraft, and there are these big bosses that pop up every so often on the island that you're doing on for Dragonflight, because they're part of each part, and they just kind of respawn in a rotation. Okay. I can't just go up to one of these guys with over 1 million hit points and kill them in 2 hits.
I don't really need enemies to be damage sponges. I don't like damage sponges, because sometimes sometimes they just add another health bar just to lengthen the combat. But again, this is Arkane. Boss battles in Arkane are these mysteries of how you're going to address them and how you're going to get around them and how you're going to trick them. Like, I remember in Dishonored 2 that there was like a whole ball you have to attend for this target. You have to infiltrate the party. You have to find a mask. You have to go through the rafters, or you have to get an invitation to get in there. And you have to figure out a way to like drug the person and get them out of the party. And there's like a whole thing you gotta do. And if you fail at that and you alert the guards, there's 1 million guards on you immediately. And there's sirens blaring and everybody's freaking out. And so you gotta really think this stuff through and how you're going to address an issue. In Redfall, I hit a trigger twice, and the boss is dead. So you remember that thing where I said maybe they had the still frames because there are no like character animations or characters in the game? Well, that illusion gets shaken pretty quickly because you get to the fire station, clear out the fire station. By the way, I'm going to say that there is one major problem with the fire station. They put a fire pole in there and you cannot slide down the fire pole. Want to point that out. If you put a fire pole in a game, you better be able to slide down the fire pole. Just saying.
Yeah, it's like putting dogs in games that you can't pet. Don't do it.
Not acceptable. I'm sorry. That pretty much just took me out of the experience altogether. But the point is, get to the fire station, clear out the fire station, and you save people that are, hiding out behind a door. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, cool, there are people behind the door. As soon as I open the door, it gets to another one of those static cutscenes where I'm just seeing the painted key art of the characters coming out and saying thank you for saving them. And then they show these other key arts of them cleaning up the fire station to turn it into a safe house. And I'm thinking, oh, I guess I don't interact with them at all. Except after they do that, the characters in full 3D rendered models are just hanging out around the firehouse. So why didn't I just have a cutscene where they were talking to me directly to keep me in the action, because it's an immersive sim, right? I want to be immersed.
Yeah. You would think it'd be easier to just do that than to have different art made.
You would think
instead of an engine engine
yeah,
cutscene.
You would think. Them calling this an immersive sim is very, very generous to immersive sims in general.
Yeah, I feel like I wouldn't call any game that's a first-person shooter kind of game an immersive sim.
There's a lot of reasons why I wouldn't really necessarily call this an immersive sim. One of them is the rarity color-coded loot system, which does not feel like it makes sense in an immersive sim, to be honest with you. But more importantly than that...
Yeah, that's more of a looter-shooter than anything.
It is.
Typically.
And I would have really liked it if they were more interesting, but chances are if you're getting like the green and the blue and the purple and the orange rarities, they're the same basic weapon as you had when they were just the white version, but with some stat bonuses on them. It's not like in Borderlands where if you get a legendary weapon, it functions completely differently. It's like a special red text weapon. These are just like, here's a stake launcher, or here's your UV gun, or here's your sniper rifle, but it's purple now, so it also gets a 25% damage bonus. Here's the legendary, or the unparalleled, I think is what they call it in this, the unparalleled rarity of the shotgun, and it has a really cool look to it, and it has a special stake in the front, so that when you go up to vampires, it looks even cooler when you stake them with the shotgun. That's
Does
fun.
it do more damage because of the stake?
No, the whole thing about vampires in this game is that you can deal damage to them with a regular weapon, but stakes are what really does it, and you can only like kill them with a stake. So the stake has to be on your weapon, and if you have a weapon that doesn't have a stake, it can't actually kill the vampire. So you have to switch to a weapon that does have the stake in order to do it. Well, that's what they tell you at the beginning, but it actually turns out UV, fire, setting them on fire because they were next to a car explosion, those also apparently killed the vampires, so. And then there's a stake launcher where you can just snipe them from like 50 feet away, like I did a couple times, with a stake to the head that kills them. I saw 3 different kinds of enemies. There are the human enemies, there are the vampires, and then there was something called a blood bag, which is basically a human that has like a blood on them that I guess vampires use to feed. They're basically humans that just have this big sack that you can shoot.
Do they explode?
A little bit. I mean, you get blood all over your clothes. It's not fun.
Right.
It's not fun. You get 4 different character classes to pick from. I ended up choosing the occultist guy. He has like spiritual necromancy stuff. He's got a raven. He can send his raven out, and it highlights enemies for him. I only picked that because my cat was with me at the time, and when I was going through the character classes, I was like, hey, Pepper, which one do you like? And when she saw the one that had the raven, she put her paw on my hand, as if to say, that one, Nathan. You take that one. And I was like, oh, okay. I'll take that one. There's a lot of open worldy stuff where like you can go on specific missions and areas, liberate different areas, and you start to realize that this does have like a lot of the open world elements that you're used to in a lot of these big sandboxy kind of games. But there's not a lot of content to it. You probably also saw, if you heard anybody talk about it, that there's a bit of sparseness to this.
Yeah.
I went into the church where the Reverend had fled. Like the Reverend, and it was a sanctuary that they had set up, and you get the impression that they probably left because there were all these vampires in the church. I go into the church. I go into every room in the church. I open the doors to the main room. I go up into the eaves. There's nothing in the church. There's no enemies in the church at all. There's no vampires in the church. There's no humans set up in the church. There's plenty of supplies in the lobby that you would think somebody would want. Tons of water. No enemies in the game. There was something that was pointed out when I was reading one of the reviews where they were talking about Warren Spector. And Warren Spector was the guy who made the original Deus Ex. And
Right.
he was talking about this idea of what the immersive sim is supposed to be. And the immersive sim for him was that, like, the old way that you would do game design was you had to find the key for the door, and then when you found the key for the door, you could open the door and you could proceed on to the rest of the game. And in an immersive sim, there should be all these different ways that you can address the door when the door is locked. You could pick the lock, you could kick it in, you could blow it up, you could get somebody to open the door for you. And Redfall will kind of do that, where you can have a lock pick, or something like that, but you really can't kick in the doors. You can't really punch the doors. I could punch in windows. Sometimes they would allow you to get in from the second story of a building, but the procedure is pretty much still the same. I go through the building, I hit the enemies with my one hit and stuff, and then I move on to the next thing, and they say my vampire lair is clear. Congratulations. It fundamentally, it doesn't change any of the story. It doesn't change how the landscape works. It doesn't change the world or the narrative. It doesn't change your character's story arc. Even when you're talking to the people themselves, you don't actually have a dialogue tree. You just walk up to them and they start talking and just say, so you'll do that mission now, and you get a mission log that says that you do. You don't actually interact with them. I don't know what happened to Arkane.
Yeah, it sounds like they went from, what was the last game they made, Dishonored 2?
Well, it was Deathloop, which was
Deathloop, right.
interesting, but not my cup of tea. But no, they went from Prey and Dishonored to this, and I'm getting the impression that maybe immersive sims don't work very well for open world settings. That doesn't seem to work very well, because like one of the great things, although Prey was kind of open world, but the thing that was really great about Dishonored and Prey is that as you're going through the game and as you're experiencing the game and doing the story missions and stuff, the world around you changes. The world around you molds to the decisions that you've made in the game. In Prey, if you take too many of these like Typhon, like alien upgrades, the security systems in the game will not recognize you as human anymore and will start attacking you.
Perfect, I love that.
If you do that. As you keep progressing in the story, more Typhon appear in areas where you previously were. You know, all of a sudden there's more shadow monsters where once there were not. In Dishonored, if you kill a lot of people instead of knocking them out, the plague gets worse. These weepers keep showing up. There's more rats in the streets. The world gets more and more and more dystopic and chaotic if you've created the chaos in that game. If you play carefully and you don't kill people and you knock them out and you try to place them aside, the weepers don't show up. The plague doesn't continue. The rats don't profligate when you go back to the city over and over again. In Redfall, it's the same thing over and over again with just some basic open world elements of go here, collect this loot box that has a few things in it, and move on to the next thing. And that is a disappointment to me. in so many ways.
Yeah, it pretty much, it just sounds like the entirety of the experience is just a disappointment.
It is, and what was funny is that recently I played another game too that was called Ghostwire Tokyo. In that one, you are also dealing with supernatural forces in a like an open world city that has like open world elements where you have to use supernatural abilities to destroy them. And surprisingly, both of these games also have like mysterious fog areas that you cannot cross without getting damaged. And what's really weird is, so I mentioned Redfall's from Arkane, and Arkane is one of the studios that Bethesda owns. Ghostwire Tokyo is from Tango Gameworks, which is also a studio that Bethesda owns.
Which is all owned by Microsoft now.
Right. And but I'm sitting here thinking to myself, maybe this is not the kind of game that Bethesda or its studios is really supposed to be making, like these open world first-person action games, because when I started thinking back on it, it's like, what did the other studios do? Okay, so like id is one of their studios. What was the last one that they did? Like, Rage 2 is the last time they tried this open world, like, action collectathon sandbox, and it wasn't very good. It was okay, but it was kind of mid. And then what was like when Machine Games did one, it was Wolfenstein Youngblood, the worst of the Wolfensteins. And I don't know if they're just greenlighting it because they needed content to come out.
I don't know. I played a game recently. I'm not going to get into it now, but it was a shooter-looter kind of game also, but not open world.
Oh, okay.
And it was still mid at best.
Yeah. Maybe in another games you didn't think we'd play, we could talk
about
that.
Or I'll talk about it on the live maybe a bit.
Okay. I started playing it before I saw any of the reviews. I started playing it the day after it launched, basically. And
it's sitting at when I looked at it yesterday, I think it was at mostly negative, 1,500 reviews on Steam. 1,000 of them were negative.
A lot of these issues started for me before I heard anybody else talk about it. And I sat there and I kind of thought to myself, it feels a little like an Arkane game. There's something that isn't working for me. And I couldn't really pinpoint it. And I think I needed other people to explain it in better terms before I could really pinpoint what I was seeing and what I was feeling. But those initial moments with the game where I'm like, it's really weird that they're presenting the game in this way, and the structure of the game and how it's laid out, it feels like they wanted to create like a multiplayer more experience rather than a single player, which is not what I want in an immersive sim at all. I don't want a color-coded rarity system where I just pick up a bunch of guns. I don't want to just deal with a bunch of generic enemies. I want something that's more personalized than that, and I want the story to evolve and the world to grow as time goes on. It's not even the technical issues of it, even though there are technical issues with it. It's that the game itself doesn't really function very well. Like, you'd have to do a lot of work to make it fun.
Yeah.
In a way that it isn't right now. Oh, I should have also mentioned, this is something that a lot of reviews didn't talk about, but if you die, because occasionally they'll just swarm you with enemies out of nowhere for reasons.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
My favorite, yeah. When you die, they basically reload you to the nearest fast travel point. You lose absolutely nothing in the process. The punishment for dying is basically, I have to now remember where I was and run back to that location. Oh, the reason I say I have to remember where I was is because they do not automatically give you drop points on the map for your mission objectives. I have to go to my map, and I have to specifically ping an area where my mission objective is.
I feel like the meta here would be to get to where you want to go, do the objective, and find a way to die so you can just get right back to your fast travel point.
That would probably do... You know what? If anyone speedruns the game, do that. Because it's probably the easiest thing for you to do. The fun thing that happened to be the one time, though, because I did wonder if the environment interacted with itself at any point. And I ran across this area where there were, dudes in a firefight. And it wasn't with me. And I thought, oh, cool. And it seemed like there was like the one mercenary group, I think they're Bellwether, and then like the Hollow Man cultists were like fighting each other. And I was like, oh, cool, so the environment will actually work with itself. But then I realized that the thing that I could just do is I just waited until the firing stopped, and there was one dude left, and I shot him once in the head, because obviously not very hard, and then I just collected all the loot.
Did they all drop loot?
They all drop stuff.
What the fuck?
Also,
usually games like that, enemies don't drop loot unless you're the one to kill them.
Well, okay, so this is while I'm complaining, they will all have like guns with them, different kinds of guns, but you can't pick up those guns.
Yeah, most games don't do that, even though that would be the thing you think they would, do.
Right. I also wouldn't think that there would be ammunition limits.
And there are?
Yeah.
I hate that.
You cannot pick up more than 15 stakes to start for your stake launcher. And it's like, they keep dropping ammunition all over the place, but it's like, why can't I just pick up whatever I got in the thing? They do it because there's upgrades, and there's upgrades to upgrade the ammunition counts that you can have for different weapons.
And get rid of those!
Yeah, exactly.
Game design tip 101.
Yeah.
Don't limit the amount of, unless you're going for a survival thing where weight is a factor.
Yeah.
Don't limit the amount of ammunition you can carry.
Right.
And if you have a skill tree dedicated to how much ammo I can carry, remove it for something more fun.
Yeah. Again, if you're doing an immersive sim, that doesn't make sense. If you wanted to have an ammo count that took up space in an inventory, and then you could manage how much ammunition you wanted to carry with you at any time,
that would make more sense.
I've done that. I've seen that plenty of times. That makes perfect sense, but it's not. It's just like an arbitrary count that you have for the guns that you use. There's all these skill trees, and as I was going through the skill trees, I kept thinking to myself, what among these skill trees do I even want? Because these upgrade my ammo capacity. These give me more health for my allies when I heal them, but I'm playing by myself. These increase my regeneration abilities when I'm down to 30% health, but by the time I'm there, I'm either dead or it never happens. These are things that give me extra headshot damage to humans, but again, I can headshot them with one shot already, so why am I doing that? And then everything else is for your special abilities, but I didn't even want to invest in those because I never used my Raven, because I never needed to spotlight where the enemies were, because the second I walked up, I saw all of these little yellow question marks that were immediately over the heads of every enemy that I couldn't see who was curious about the sound that was being made in the first place, so I automatically knew where they all were. And then I could just kind of walk slightly over to the side and ping them in the head because they're not very observant. So I kept thinking to myself, I don't even know why I have an upgrade tree. There's not a lot that I even want for the skill tree upgrades.
Felt like when I was playing Borderlands, and I was just I don't want half of this shit. What the fuck?
The original Borderlands especially, there's not great. They did better in later iterations with what you got, but it's the skill trees were So anyway, Redfall, I don't know what happened. This is like Twilight but video game. But also not sparkly vampires, and also does not have Robert Pattinson or Kristen Stewart.
Probably be better if they did.
I really wish that they did. Do you understand that if they actually had a Twilight story in this that had those characters in it, it would have been a better story? It would have been a better story and more interesting, and the characters would have been fun. I want that. Can we make a Twilight mod for Redfall? Please. I need a Twilight mode for Redfall.
This has been a soapbox of a games you didn't think we'd put.
And I don't think I'm going back to it. So if you improve upon it now, Arkane, I'm sorry. I'm pretty much peaced out. So
yeah, I feel like a lot of people probably have.
Yeah, so anyway, that was a lot. Let's move on to something more interesting.